I wanted to be a pilot since I was really, really little. My mom tells a story about my dad worked for United Airlines in Chicago. That was their headquarters, and he was an accountant for them. So we started airplanes really little. I mean, I don't even remember my first flight. I was so young. And that was a time when you got on an airplane, you got to meet the pilot, and it was very social, not like it is now. And people used to ask oh, Kimmy, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would tell them, oh, I want to be a pilot. And then they would say, oh, honey, you mean stewardess? Mom was like, no, I think she really means pilot. Like, honey, girls aren't pilots. It's like, so for years, I just wanted to be a pilot. So one day I was at the career development in my high school and talking to like where I wanted to go to college, what I wanted to do, and I mentioned that I wanted to be a pilot. And the guy's like, oh my God, I got this great opportunity. United Airlines has a co-op program that their pilots through the Boy Scouts Explorer Post was offering to get people their license. Would you be interested? I'm like, well, that sounds cool. Because yeah, you join the Explorer Post and then you pay for the rental of the airplane, but then the United Airline pilots are donating their time to teach. And I'm like, that sounds great. So I went home and told my mom and dad, I'm like, hey, look, I want to do this. And my mom's like, okay. My dad's like, this is going to be expensive still. And I mean, this was in the 70s. I mean, extra money was never a big proponent in anybody's family back in the 70s. So he's like, well, I think you're going to have to get a job. At that time, I ran cross country and track at the high school. So it was my senior year. And he's like, there's only one way we can do this. If you don't get a job, we're not going to be able to pay for this. So I was like, okay. So I quit cross country and track, went out and got a job, and paid for the rental part, and then United paid their pilots volunteered. So I got my private pilot when I was in high school. So at that time I was like, well, now what do I do? I started looking at colleges. Purdue had a great program. Southern Illinois had a good program. University of Dubuque in Iowa had some programs. St. Louis University had a great program. But at that time, the pilot thing was like, I really wanted to do it, but it just seemed like kind of a crazy idea. So I thought I would apply for the engineering program at Purdue and do aeronautical engineering, because I figured, well, that's a good backup plan. So I applied to Purdue, University of Illinois, and I got a letter from Purdue saying that didn't make it into the program, I was going to be on the wait list. So I thought, well, that's a lot of money. Like they said, most of the time if you go the first semester, the second semester you'll get in. I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of money to go out of state. So I started looking around, and the University of Dubuque had a good program. But still, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I thought, you know what? Our community college at the time had a really, really excellent engineering program. You did 2 years there. If you got your associates in engineering, it was a block, and it transferred directly to University of Illinois, directly to Purdue, and even MIT accepted it as a 2-year program, engineering. You became a junior at their program. So I'm like, that sounds like a good deal. So I went to the local college, got my 2-year associate's degree, and at that time, I was like, now what do I do? I really wanted to fly. I'm like, okay, I really have to put my effort and money into flying. So checked into University of Dubuque, and because they were a private school, they offered a lot of grants and funding. So it worked out better to go to University of Dubuque. So that's where I headed to Dubuque and finished up my instrument, commercial, and multi-engine. So I graduated from college, I had all my ratings. So at that point, I was working as a dispatcher. Like my senior year, I worked as a dispatcher, and then worked in their flight program. Like if an airplane was to be transported somewhere, I didn't do any of the I wasn't in the group that did commercial flying, but I would work in the area that if planes had to be moved around. And I've graduated from college. I'm working at the commuter airline as a dispatcher, and unbeknownst to me, one of my mom's very good friends, I've known the man since I was little. his wife is a sorority sister of my mom, tells my mom that DEA is hiring pilots. I couldn't even spell DEA. Didn't even know what DEA, didn't even know what it was. I was, from a suburban small town of Chicago. Didn't know what DEA was, didn't know anything about it. And he's like, well, they're hiring pilots. So Mom's like, you should apply. So I'm like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So because they were hiring pilots. Made sense. So I filled the application, and it took a long time because, I think that time my grandmother ended up getting sick, and I moved my mom down to Florida to help take care of her. Still applications and going back and forth. And finally came back, my grandma died, came back to Chicago. I got a call for an interview. So I went in for the interview. Still, to this day, I wouldn't get hired today because I walked in that interview thinking I was going to be a DEA pilot. That's all I knew. Didn't even know what DEA did. Didn't know it had guns involved. So I went into the interview, and back then the interviews are very informal. Now they're very scripted. The questions are down to, they can only ask certain questions. So they start talking to me about my flying and stuff like that. And the guy looks at me and says, we don't hire pilots. I was like, oh, I guess I'm in the wrong place. He goes, you have to be an agent first. I'm like, I said, he said, you have to carry a gun. What do you think about that? I go, well, I've never shot a gun, but I'm sure your training is top notch and whatever you need. He's like, okay. So then he started talking about, there was a female on the panel, and she started talking about buying drugs and the seedy side of Chicago. And I'm like, no, I've never bought drugs before. I said, but I'm sure your training, that was my go-to answer. I'm sure you've got excellent training. So the interview was long. The guy asked me a bunch of questions. Basically, I still had no idea why I was there. Once he said, we don't hire pilots, you have to be an agent first. And I was like, yeah. But I thought, I'll just go with the flow, and kept telling him my answer was just training. I love to fly. I'm sure you got great training. So I left the interview room, went out in the hall, and waited and asked the receptionist. We didn't have cell phones, so I asked the receptionist, could I use your phone? So I wanted to call my mom. And I told her on the phone, I said, I didn't realize. I said, this is a law enforcement agency. I said, they carry guns. I said, they're not hiring pilots. She's like, oh, well, probably the interview, it was a good experience. I'm like, yeah, it was really, really interesting because I'd never been in that kind of interview before. So the guy came out, and he said to me, he goes, we were so impressed with your training. We were so impressed with your background, your enthusiasm. He goes, we're sending your application out to DC. I was like, oh, I was waiting for that. I'm really sorry, but I was like, oh, okay, great. So that, well, I better find out what this is about. So went home, I called my mom's friend and got some more information, and then never heard anything. And then one day, I guess must have been in the fall of, fall of '84, I get a call. And it's like, hi, and this is, so-and-so from Washington, D.C., DEA. We've accepted your application. You've gone through, the background, everything's done, and we have a class open that starts like Monday. Would you be interested? And I'm like, once again, ignorance sometimes is bliss, because I had no idea that this was such a huge thing, because they hadn't hired in years. So the classes were like, people who had been waiting 4 or 5 years to get in. This is so exciting. So this woman's like, on Monday, I'm thinking, where's the school at? She's like, it's in Glencoe, Georgia. I'm like, I said, no. I got the holidays coming up. I'm thinking, no. I said, that's just not going to work out for me. She's like, you do know that you're going to go on the bottom of the list. I'm like, yeah, oh, okay. You got to remember, I was really young. I was only in my early 20s at the time. This wasn't my life vocation at the time, so I didn't really feel like I was missing out on anything, because I didn't know what I was going to miss out on. She's like, I really want you to think through this, because your name's going to go on the bottom of the list. She's like, I've got hundreds of people in front of you then. I go, oh, so when do you think I'll make it in again? She's like, maybe not till sometime next year. I go, oh, okay, that sounds good. She's like, okay. Well, I didn't realize that she had like a quota. She had so many, like going to men, and was trying to get so many women in each one of the classes. So about a week later, the phone rings again. It's her. And I'm like, hey, how are you? She's like, fine. She goes, would February work for you? I was like, yeah, that sounds good. She goes, okay. She goes, it was going to be in February. I said, thank you very much, because we'll get in touch with you because you have to go down to the office and get sworn in and all that before you go, but somebody will be in touch with you. So I told my mom, I go, hey, Mom, I'm in. She's like, is this sure you want to do something like this? I go, well, I said, I don't know. I said, it sounds like a really cool adventure. I said, it's totally out of my lane. I said, but there's airplanes involved in it. I'm going to go for it. She's like, okay, good luck. And that was it. Off to Glencoe, Georgia. Going to Glencoe, Georgia was a total, once again, out of my venue. DEA sent me a list of things I had to bring. One of them was brown high-heeled shoes. And if you think brown high-heeled shoes were hard to find in 1985, they were impossible. My mom and I actually went down to Chicago to go try to find some. So finally I found a mid-heel brown shoe. When I got there, at that time in Glencoe, it's an old military base. So they gave me go through the main gate, and you then tell you where to go. So I got there at this room, and I'm like, DEA, hey, nice to meet you. And like, DEA, do what? I go, DEA, and they're like, I have no idea what that is. I go, oh no. I mean, just total panic. Then there's like, you shared a bathroom, and then the girl in the bathroom, she was going to some other school. And then I started going around asking everybody in the hall, where are you here for? I'm here for like a week, 2 weeks. I'm like, no one in the whole hall even knew what DEA was, because Department of Justice, we were the only ones that were there. From FBI had their own academy in Quantico. So I was a little apprehensive, because now I was like, where am I? What am I doing? So I had a little map out the next morning and where I had to go, and I found my way to our building, and I went inside, and literally it was filled with old men. And I was like, I'm definitely in the wrong. All in suits, everybody, but at that time, DEA, the max you could be was 35, now it's 37. And these men had been waiting for years and years to get in. So I said the average guy was in his 30s, which seemed really old to me. So, because I thought, academy class, it'd be all young people there, and I'm walking around and I'm thinking, this is crazy. This is just, now what have I done? So I had us in alphabetical order, and my maiden name was Reese, so R, I was in the back. And, kind of meet and greet, sitting down, I kept looking at my name tag. I'm like, I'm in the right place. There's my name on my desk, but I was definitely feeling out of my realm. So everybody had to get up, say where they were from, what their background was, and why they wanted to be a DEA special agent. So, the guys were getting up saying, Jim McCormick, I'm from New York City. I've been a New York City detective for, 10 years. Next guy, I'm so-and-so. I'm from Boston. I'm a homicide detective. I'm a state trooper from South Carolina. And they're going round and round. I'm thinking to myself, what have I done? I said, I'm definitely off the deep end. So I got up, explained who I was, pilot, ratings, happy to be here, type thing. And I sat down thinking, crazy. But then afterwards, people kept coming up saying, oh, you're a pilot? And yes, and they're like, oh, so glad you're here, and we have a great aviation program. Are you looking to go in the aviation program? So I got re-bolstered about okay, yes, this is where I should be. As far as the women go, I think we started out with 6 or 7. I think 3 ended up graduating. So, but we lost a lot of people. Back then, the academy was a little bit different than it was now. They really were more about rooting out any people that weren't up to snuff. I mean, it was really, really difficult watching people leave. But it was the best experience I've had in my life. I mean, it was the best. So really, really enjoyed it. No, DEA requires, it's one of them, probably the only law enforcement agency that does this, but DEA at that time required a minimum of 2 years as an agent before you could get into the program. And on average, it was taking between 5 and 10 years. Because once I got out, then started talking to people, there have been people, 5 to 10 years is about where it was. But my first assignment was Miami, and which is kind of an interesting story to begin with, because I thought I was going back to Chicago. I mean, why wouldn't I go back to Chicago? It's a big city, So when that was the time in the 80s, things in Miami were pretty rough. I mean, we spent a lot of time showing videos and pictures of all the horrible things that were happening down in Miami. So that wasn't on my list. It's a first choice or a third choice or any choice. So, but when the recruiter called me in and said, we've picked Miami for you, I was like, yeah, you think? I said, I have no law enforcement experience. Maybe something a little bit more low-key. He's like, no, he goes, the reason I picked Miami for you is because it has the largest aviation program. And obvious, with your pilot experience, that's where you want to go eventually. So if you go to Miami, you'll get the most law enforcement experience in a short period of time. And when the time comes for you to go into the air wing, you'll have really had some good DEA experience. I was in a group that butted up with that time the early money laundering. So I actually worked the precursor to Noriega's case. My senior partner at the time, one of my senior partners, his case was the precursor to the Noriega case. We traveled to Costa Rica, and I don't know if you remember, but there was a big DEA interview in this, I guess it was this up in Washington, D.C., and they had a Panamanian, and he testified with he had a hood over him so they wouldn't know who he was, testified in front of Congress about the problems. That was my senior partner's CI, and we worked with him for years. So that was one of the big cases. That case, the other one was, I can't remember the name of it. It was a big money laundering case out of Group 8. And then just a lot of buy bust, where you put the CI out to buy drugs and then you arrest everybody. Just a lot of, big cases. I did. I worked with Dan because one of the things Dan was doing was we were money laundering, and we were picking up millions of dollars. So I would go with him and played the role as the girlfriend, as an extra, So I did do some undercover, but mainly my biggest role undercover was working with Dan on the money laundering case. We had a Jaguar, and we would drive, and pick up literally millions of dollars. It was crazy. So lots of exciting times back in Miami during those years. After being there, actually it was just exactly 2 years. I got a call saying that the Air Wing had an opening and would I be interested. And they offered me, was it South Carolina? It wasn't Miami. And then they called again, they kept changing it, and finally they're like, no, Miami. And the office was at Opelika, which is between Fort Lauderdale and Miami. So I reported there in January. So it was just 2 years. Yes, but at the time I didn't know that. Like, I wasn't like, I want to become the first DEA female pilot. It was just like, I want to fly airplanes. So when I got to Opelika, I mean, it was a big organization. I mean, they had pilots all across the United States. So it didn't, at that point, there was no women in Opelika, but there wasn't a lot of women in Miami. So it wasn't unusual that I was the only girl in the room. So once again, a lot of senior guys in there. That was a little more intimidating. You know, they were traveling the world. I mean, DEA had operations down in Mexico and in South America, and it was just more intimidating to be with these guys that had been places and done things with airplanes that I just could not even imagine doing. And they were wonderful. When I got there, I had to go through some training to get recertified and everything with their equipment. Our main operation in Florida was to surveillance, like as a Fort Lauderdale pilot in Miami. We helped that whole region for surveillances, and then eventually I moved up into the, because I had all my ratings, I had my multi-engine, moved into the small multi-engines, and the multi-engines, a lot of times we flew with 2 people, but like because the Bahamas were so close, they allowed 1 person. So I'd gotten checked out in the multi-engine. It was a Navajo, and we also had some small Cessnas. And I got a call on Saturday morning from the head guy there in Opelika. He's like, hey, there's some supplies that need to go over to Opelika, from Opelika. They're there now with the supplies. Can you go fly them over to Nassau? And I was like, well, who's going with me? He's like, oh, no, you got checked out on Friday. You're good to go. And to this day, I still remember just loading up all that equipment, going over to, that was easy because I was home. That felt comfortable. So I flew over to Nassau, and then after I unloaded the people and the stuff, then I had to come back by myself. And I can still remember to this day sitting on that tarmac, starting up those engines, just hoping they both started, because when hot engines and those kind of planes, I'm like, I just can't make any mistakes. You know, I don't want to call someone and say, I can't get the engine started. So I got both of them started and flew back to Opelika, and I thought to myself, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. All by myself coming back from Nassau. I'm like, this is going to be a great career. I was single and just couldn't get enough of the adventure. And because of that, I think that kind of helped really take off my career, because the word no wasn't part of my vocabulary. It was like, where are you going? Can I go with you? That sounds fun. Never like, we'll have to check my schedule, or I've got, my only obligation was to just take in as much as I could from this cool job. So one of my best memories back then was one of the guys said, hey, I have to take some parts. I'm going to do a part run. I've got to go to all across South America and drop off parts and pick up the course, because that time it was really hard to get the stuff through the mail back and forth. He said, do you want to come? I'm like, yes. He goes, I'm leaving in the morning. I'm like, great. I said, how long will be gone? He goes, I don't know, because it's going to take a while. We don't know. And he was from Panama at that time. The only office we had was Panama, as far as people stationed. So we loaded up the plane. It was a Aero Commander, and full of parts, and took off out of Opelika and did the whole South America circuit. Went to Panama, and then down to Bogota, over to Lima, and then Lima over to Bolivia, and back around. So I got to see all the places in South America, which is just relit a whole aspect of DEA and the aviation program that I just had, like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. We had, that time was, you went TDY 30 to 60 days in these different countries, but there was no one down there permanently. And, so we're in Lima, and so we're in Panama. We're in Panama to Lima first. We're in Panama. We stayed at his house, and because DEA had rented apartments there, so we stayed there, and so it was all fitted for U.S. appliances. But when he got to Lima, Lima was 220, and guys don't understand women's appliances, curlers, blow dryers, things like that. So the plugs in Lima are the same. They don't look any different. Where some of the countries have round plugs, these still have the straight plugs. So I took my curling iron, plugged it in, was in the hotel, was getting ready, and that time we were staying at a suite of different rooms that they had rented out, and went to curl my hair, and the curling iron being plugged at 110 and 220 was probably 10 times higher than it should be, and I totally fried the whole side of my, I mean literally down to like the nubs. And of course, burnt hair smells like burnt skin. It's terrible. So of course then I have to start crying because that's what you do when you burn off half your head. And knock on the door, and Russ opens the door and he could smell the burnt hair. And he's like, and of course I'm in tears, and he's like, what happened? I said, you know, I burnt my head. And he's like, it's 220, you can't plug it in, your curling iron into the wall. I'm like, no one told me. So that was my welcome to South America. And but that was the whole thing. I mean, the guys wouldn't know to warn a girl not to plug her curling iron into a 220 outlet. They wouldn't even know I had a curling iron. So, but on we went with just cut the rest of them off, and off we went. Had a great time. And so from there, being in South America and then taking other trips down there, I fell in love with Lima. And the opportunity came up when they decided to put permanent pilots in Lima. They said, they kept saying, Kim, you should put in for that job. I'm like, oh. I said, I don't know. I said, that time I was married by now. And so I went home to my husband. I'm like, what do you think? He's like, why not? We have no kids. If we're going to do something like crazy like this, let's put in for Lima. So I put in for Lima, and I was down there TDY, temporary duty, and flying. And it was in the middle of a civil war. I mean, it was not fun in Lima at the time. And was in with the country attaché. And this is my very first bump with your girl. The DEA had been wonderful. No one had ever said anything to me about it. I think I kind of forgot that there was, I mean, the camaraderie, the guys working, didn't realize I was not in the in-group till that moment when the country attaché said to me, oh, I saw that you put in for the job here. I go, yeah, we did. I go, really excited about it. He goes, well, I called headquarters and told him no. I go, excuse me? He goes, yeah. He goes, a female can't do this job down here. I said, what? He's like, yeah. He goes, you have to work with the Peruvian police and with the Peruvian military, and in this society, they can't, women can't do this job. I go, okay. Totally, it hit me. I had it totally set me back. And went back to Opalaca and just thought to myself, wow. A couple days later, I get a call from aviation program, said, congratulations, you've been picked for the slot in Lima. I go, what? I go, I thought the country attaché. He goes, the country attaché doesn't dictate who we send down there. I go, because you're best qualified? He goes, you're going. I go, thank you. So it was like, I went down there and he never said anything to me, and I just did my job, and I never had a problem. Matter of fact, I think it averages the opposite, because the Peruvian military, the Peruvian police, anybody we had to deal with, I was more of a novelty to them than they loved me. I mean, I can't tell you the way they treated me was actually nicer than what, because at that point too, I was kind of in the back of my mind, he had put a seed in my head that maybe this wasn't something that a girl should be doing in South America. But I mean, there was no other women pilots in Peru. I mean, on the radio, I was the only female voice, but they would call me by my name, Miss Kim. Oh, Miss Kim, what would you like? You know, the guys would just start laughing. They thought it was the funniest thing because the controllers, the police, I mean, everybody would just treated me above and beyond it, but not what the country attaché had expected, that I would have no authority. I had more authority than the boys did. Operation Snowcap was in full swing at the time. So we were direct support with them. We had a Casa 212, which is a big transport plane that worked in the jungle. And that was supported by TDY pilots. There was always 2 TDY pilots in Peru at the time. And then there was the 2 permanent pilots, Phil Martin and I, in Lima. And we had, when I got there, we had a Commander 1000 and a Cheyenne. And then eventually we switched out the other Aero Commander 1000 for 2 Cheyennes. And then by the time I left, we had a King Air 350. So I actually did 6 years in Lima. Operation Snowcap was put in place to help the Peruvians stem the flow of cocaine from Lima, from the jungle. Huallaga Valley is where the cocaine was coming from. Mainly it was being brought in from Colombia in the raw form and then transformed to the product that people use in the United States. So it was huge, I just lost the word. What do you call that when you... Anyways, the production of the cocaine was there. Laboratories. Oh, I don't know where that word just went. So that was where they had the laboratories, huge laboratories. So you had the transport of it coming in from Colombia and then leaving Peru. So one of the things they were doing was helping to find these big mega labs to stop that because the inflow of the chemicals, plus the airplanes that were coming in. It was like O'Hare Central at night there. You could hear the planes coming in, loading up with cocaine, going northbound. It was crazy. So the Peruvians had huge groups of military and police, and then the Snowcap agents came down for 90 days to help organize and use our resources to help them stem that type of trafficking in their country, because they were in the middle of a civil war, and the civil war and the cocaine trafficking was just devastating that whole area of the country. King Airs, well, during that time it was a King Air, but when I originally got down there, it was the Commanders and the Cheyennes. You can't, because of the time of the terrorism, you couldn't drive from Lima to the valley. There was only one road that came through, across the mountains into the valley, and it was a red zone. You couldn't, so you had, the only way to go from Lima out to the valley was by flying. In the Huallaga Valley, that's where the Santa Lucia, the main camp was, and when I got there, Tingo Maria is where they were stationed, but eventually they built this camp called Santa Lucia, where that's where the agents lived then, there in Santa Lucia. They would come in for like 90 days at a time, so 90 days in, and then the next group would come in for 90 days. So our job, we had 3 masters. We had the embassy people, we had the Snowcap people, and then we had the Air Wing people. So we had 3 people who all thought they were extremely important, and that's what we would work for those 3. DEA Air Wing is, we're the helpers, to get things done. Like if you need something, we're there to help. So people movement and cargo movement. So the only way to get supplies and people in and out was through us or the State Department airplane. So basically flew, at that time we were flying them 6 to 7 days a week, and sometimes 2 times a day, going back and forth, bringing people. A couple times there at Santa Lucia, because that base camp was surrounded by the red zone, so there was a couple times that the camp came under fire, and once again, I realized that I was a female. I wouldn't sleep in the main camp with the guys. They would let me have a special, because all men, and they slept in open bunks. So they'd let me sleep in a separate room where they would have, like the generals would sleep when they came to camp. So, but logistically, I didn't realize till one night, very late in the evening, that where I was sleeping and where DEA Snowcap was on like opposite sides. So one night was under attack and the sirens were going off and all the lights. When I went to leave, I realized I would have to cross the main area to get behind the barracks where the snowcapper slept. So that was the last night I slept there. At the times, like, you know what, I'm just going to sleep with the guys in the big tent, because that was too terrifying to realize that I was actually across, when the shooting started, I was actually across the area. Because they took the helicopters up and they were circling the camp, shooting at the guys that were shooting at the camp. And I was like sitting there thinking, this probably wasn't this. It seemed like a good idea at the time to have my own bedroom, but in a short time, I was like, forever I was going to sleep with the guys. I came to Lima. I was married and no kids. I left Lima with 2 children. So
you were flying while you were pregnant?
I was. Which was funny because, you know, the snowcappers, what they would do is they would go back to Washington, and then the group that was coming down, they would meet for like a week in Washington and talk about what they did and what the next group was going to do, and like pass over, you know, intel information between the 2 groups. And one group said to the other group, hey, has Kim had her baby yet? And the other group, oh, you know, I think she's got a couple months or whatever. And someone at headquarters heard and about fell to their knees. I mean, you would have thought, I mean, they just went crazy. So they started calling down, and headquarters was calling, the aviation unit was calling. They're like, you're pregnant. And we're like, yeah. We have to do something. I'm like, write a letter, do something. I'm like, what would you like? We wanted you to say that medically that you had a plan if you went into labor when you were in the jungle. I called up a friend of mine who was an attorney. I said, what do I do? Like, what do I put on paper? They want something on paper to cover the fact that I'm pregnant and flying airplanes in the jungle. He goes, what does the FAA say? I said, FAA doesn't say anything. I said, we're under the guidance that if you have your medical and you're in good health, you take a self-check, and you know, if you're in good health, you're good to fly. If you're not in good health, then you have to self-regulate. He's like, okay, we'll put that down, that you're following that FAA guidance and that you will continue to follow the letter of the law by the FAA. I said, okay. So I wrote that letter and sent it up to headquarters and never heard another word. So they were happy with the letter and continued to fly. So. I had, it was pretty much going from, 200 miles an hour to calm. But I was ready for that. I had the 2 kids and came to Albuquerque. What I didn't realize was the calm only lasted a very short period of time because DEA was expanding and they had the need for experienced people to fly this equipment. And so I found myself back in Lima a lot, and Colombia and Mexico. And so I spent a lot of time on the road. So my time in first 5 or 6 years in Albuquerque, most of the time was spent TDY. So my husband's like, we should have just stayed in Lima. I said, well, we were done 6 years. I said, he goes, because you've been back in Lima more than you've been here. I said, well, unfortunately, that's how it goes. So I did that, and then there was an opening in the Lear program. So I thought, well, that sounds like a Lear. The Lear, we had 2 Lear 35s. So I said, hey, I think I'm ready for a new adventure. So applied for the Lear 35 program, and I was looking at the other people who applied, and I thought, I said, I got all that time from being in Lima, all that overseas time. I have all that time. I said, the other people applying, I said, and also time on the job. I said, I think I'm like, got to be the number one on this list here. So this is looking pretty good. So phone rings one day and I answer it, and the person says to me, hey, I want to let you know that I'm going to break the glass ceiling and I'm going to appoint you as the first female Lear pilot. And I said, excuse me? He goes, yeah, I'm going to break the glass ceiling and I'll make you the first Lear pilot. And I go, okay, can I get back to you a minute? I need to think about this. And he goes, sure. So I hang up, and I just started crying. I said, you got to be kidding me. That call should not have been, I'm going to break the glass ceiling. That call should have been, I've looked over the candidates, and you're the most qualified. Welcome to the Lear program. So I thought, oh, now what do I do? Because I'm going to tell him no. I said, that's just wrong. So I thought, well, let me give it some thought. So I called up a friend of mine, and I said to him, I said, I'm going to tell him no. He said, why? I go, because that's just wrong. And he said, well, it is. He goes, but no one in the DEA Air Wing is going to say, oh, look, Kim got that job because she's a female, because everybody knows you were the best on that list. So I was like, okay. But once again, I was like, so I called him back up and said, okay. I said, thank you. I'm looking forward to it. Welcome to the Lear program. So, and that was pretty exciting to fly jets. That was another list thing, another thing I would like to do. So I did that for how many years? But the Lear program was totally different. It was more transport. It didn't do anything with operations. Like, one thing about the King Air 350 is all about the operations. You're supporting the guys in the field. You're doing, it's a group effort. Whatever you're doing is to help somebody else. The Lear was a lot of, you were on for 2 weeks, and I think 10 of the 14 days, and you're in a different hotel. You just, every morning was up and out to another location. I mean, we worked really hard, but it was sometimes pick the administrator up, sometimes it was, pick up this person. It was just a lot of drop and go back and forth. It wasn't exciting as doing operations in South America and stuff. So at the time that we had 2 Lear 35s, and then we went to a Lear 60. So there was a time in between there. Bill Penny and I flew the 2 Lear 35s to Oklahoma, and that was kind of a sad day watching them go. We had had them for such a long time, and I guess they're being sold for parts, because the airstrip that we took them into, you could only fly in, but you couldn't fly out. The runway wasn't long enough to leave. We could only land. So we went in there with minimal fuel, landed the airplanes there, and left them on the strip there. But then we got the Lear 60. There was a long time between the Lear 35 and the Lear 60. So I went back to flying the King Air, and I just stayed in the King Air program. I just really loved it, and I liked it. I like going down to South America. I liked the mission, and so I went back to 350. We did. Our extradition system was totally different. Now it's very legalized. Before, one of my favorite ones is we were sent down to Ecuador, and there was a Colombian that was on the list, and he was going from Bogota to Quito. And when he got to Quito, he was denied entrance by the Ecuadorians, which was prepared by us. And what they said to him was, but the next flight out is that one down there. And it was DEA. So he just picked him up and left. But now it's, lawyers and things, but back in that time it was pretty much run and gun, and that was a fun one. We got that guy out. Let's see, I've done some King Air 350 ones. This recently was down with, did they take out Al Barbie? I didn't take him out because it was like, I think we had 6 people were given up at the time. I took one of the Haitians out back to the States. I don't remember his name, but that was exciting because they brought them all in helicopters into Toluca from the prison, and to see Barbie at the time. He was always very robust with his, I think he wore that logo shirt that he always had on, but to see him go up and be strip searched and hauled out of there was, well, the Mexican military. Heartbeat moments. There was a couple good ones. One of my favorite ones was self-induced, but flying out of Lima in the Cheyenne, we were on our way to Costa Rica. And very common in South America is communication problems. So to cross someone's border or cross into some other country, you have to have permission. And it's done by teletypes and faxes, and you get a number. It says this is your authorization number. So no one's in radar contact in these countries at the border areas. So it's common to fly, say, up to Bogota, and you leave the Lima airspace controller, and they transfer you to Colombia, and Colombia says, oh, I don't have your permission. You're like, oh yeah, here's the number, and they talked to you for a while, and they said you can't come into our country, you don't have permission, but you keep on flying because eventually, in all the years, it's always been, oh yeah, I got it, you know, proceed, tell me your estimate for the next fix. So that's a common occurrence for them to say, I don't have it, and you're like, no, here it is, let me check, I gotta make a phone call, and they get back to you and say, hey, sure, come on in, you're authorized to enter the airspace. So this time we were flying from Peru to Costa Rica, and we had to transfer over the top of Ecuador. So I had my list of permissions, and we get to Ecuador, and Ecuador says the same thing. At that time, Lima and Peru and Ecuador were having some skirmish issues with their border. So there had been some issues. So I think that kind of escalated some of the problems. So the guy comes back and says, I don't have your permission. And I said, no, here it is, here's my number. No, I don't have that number. I said, well, look it up. So at that time, we call up on our HF radio, we get a hold of our headquarters in Texas and tell them, hey, you need to get a hold of our handler and let them know we're having problems with this number. So we're going back and forth, but of course, I'm keep on going, because one of the issues is I can't make it, if I turn around or do anything, I can't make it to Costa Rica for fuel. I have to keep on going. So I'm flying, and we're going back and forth, and I'm getting closer to Quito now, and he's like, no, you're gonna have to land in land. I go, I have it, but because you have to start your descent. Once again, if I start my descent and then he finds it, I'm gonna have to land anyways. I'm like, so I wait and wait, and finally we're going back and forth, and he's like, no, you must land. You must start your descent. Now I'm in his radar, so he knows where I'm at. And we're on the phone. The phone's like telling the HF radio dispatch, and they're telling us, no, you have your permission. We're on the phone with the handler. Everything's fine. You're good to go. I'm like, well, I got this guy on my radio telling me I got to land. And they're like, I go, so I'm going to go ahead and land, I guess. And he goes, then I get one more call. Look out your left wing. I look out, and there is a Ecuadorian Air Force MiG going like this. And I'm like, great, yes, sir, I'm landing. Power back and started a descent. But I mean, I remember looking out and seeing that guy there going. I mean, he was like right up on my wing. I'm like, I got it. The guy in the back took a picture of it, so it's still hanging in my house. I just love that picture. It reminds me what it was. So we land, and to make matters worse, they still didn't figure out that we weren't some terrorists, I guess, coming into their country. So when we land, the plane is surrounded by Ecuadorian military, and these guys look like guns pointing at us. And we had to get out of the airplane. But as soon as we start exiting the airplane, all of a sudden you could see the guns start coming down, and these other people come out on the ramp, and then the apologies start. Oh, we're so sorry. Our fax machine didn't have electricity in the tower, and they plugged it in, and we know you have permission. So our handler came out, and actually they bought our gas at the time, and I think they had made a call to the embassy, and the embassy and that too, and the embassy said, "Oh, we don't have any, U.S. embassy airplanes, but we're not U.S. embassy, we're DEA," and that gets all confusion. So, yeah, that was my almost arrest there in Ecuador with the MiG. That was pretty heart thumping, especially when I saw those little guys with guns pointing at us, because you just never know what they're going to do or who they think you are. But that was kind of exciting. Well, that was actually my second gun pointing experience. My first one was in Guantanamo Bay, because we used Guantanamo Bay as a fuel stop, and we also used it for our CSs. Back then in the 80s, we had DEA cooperating individuals, cooperating sources. Now they're called CSs. Back then they were CIs, cooperating individuals. But we used to bring in drugs from South America, and one of DEA's operations, and we'd have the CS or CI, the cooperating person, would use their airplanes, fly to South America, pick up the drugs, then they would bring them in the States, and then we would arrange for the people accepting the drugs to come get them, and then we'd arrest them. So this guy, they were coming in and landing Guantanamo Bay, you had to have a code word. So obviously we'd have to give the cooperating individual the code word so we could land at Gitmo, get gas, and then we meet him in the United States with the drugs. So these guys are really crafty. I mean, that's why they're always playing both sides. So one time I was there coming through and talking to the fueler. He goes, "Oh yeah, your boy was here yesterday." I'm like, "Which boy?" The guy that comes in all the time in that red Navajo. I go, "He was here yesterday?" It's like, oh no. So I had to make some phone calls, and sure enough, he wasn't supposed to come through yesterday. He had just, they're very brazen, So he was bringing in drugs for himself, used the code word to come through. So of course, we had to put out a blatant thing to all the controllers and people in Gitmo that, that the code word isn't compromised. So a couple days later, I was down in Gitmo. I came in, and someone in the miscommunication, I was not the compromised code word. The guy had the compromised code word. So when I landed, they thought we were the bad guys. So once again, surrounded by, this time it's the U.S. military pointing guns at us, and they actually made us get out, get on the ground, with our faces on the ground on that 110 cement there. It was so hot, and so they could get out and ID who we were, but it's like another self-inflicted wound there. I mean, we told them not to, the DEA had the compromise, but we were not the compromised people. So eventually they figured out that we were not the bad people, that we're actually the real people. One of the guys recognized me. He's like, "Oh, no, she's an agent, it's okay. But there we were with our faces on the tarmac there at Guantanamo Bay. Afghanistan. We have King Airs at the time in Afghanistan, and because of the maintenance, we had to bring the King Airs back and forth from Fort Worth to Afghanistan. So I'd done the trip many times from Fort Worth to Afghanistan. You go up through Canada, cross over to Greenland, Iceland, and then pick something, the European Ireland, Scotland, somewhere up that way, and then work your way into Europe, and then come around down and through Afghanistan. So this way I was coming back from Afghanistan, going back to Fort Worth, and I was in Iceland, heading to Greenland, and checked the weather, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky from Iceland to Canada. It was beautiful. It's going to be a great flight. So load up with gas, took off out of Iceland. Another great day in DEA, beautiful blue skies, everything's good. And we're cutting across, and the controller comes on and says something I didn't really understand, except the only thing I heard at the end was, "What are your intentions?" I thought to myself, what are my intentions? I said, I'm landing in Greenland. So he comes back, and what happened was a temperature version of climate thing happened, and where we were landing was 0 visibility. That the dew point and the temperature and the ice in the air, no one was landing there. I'm like, well, how long is this going to last? He's like, what are your intentions? I'm like, oh, this is not good. So we had Canada, we're trying to get a hold of them because I had the weather, and trying to figure out where to go. We had a place picked on your flight plan. You have to pick an alternate. So I said, well, we're going to go the alternate. But now I'm thinking, trying to figure out fuel, because at that point we were pretty close to coming into Greenland. So we're trying to figure out if we could make it, and we realized that it was going to be really, really close. So we're there doing the calculations, and they gave us the turn. But when we turned to the north, the wind was just right in our nose, and we went back to hardly any airspeed. We were not coming over the ground. And I was like, just sitting there going, I think my finger had a bruise on it from trying to refigure out the fuel power settings, and the weather was so beautiful. I mean, you could see all of Greenland, and coming up, we actually landed north of the Arctic Circle, because there's not a lot of choices in Greenland. We couldn't turn around. We're past the turnaround point. So we have trackers on our airplanes, and time change and things. And we had the HF radio going. This guy kept asking me, if we were, like, what our fuel source and what we're going to do. And the phone rings, because we have phones on board. And I look at the number, and it's Texas, because they just came on and turned the lights on, because they open up, and they look and see, why is Kim going northbound? She's supposed to be going toward, us. And I'm looking at that phone. I look at the guy I'm flying with. I'm like, don't answer it. I said, I got 4 things beaming at us right now. I said, we'll deal with them later, because I can just see them with a cup of coffee going, what's she doing going northbound, And they're like, where's she going? So finally we figured out, and we ended up landing. Funny, though, it was a holiday in Greenland, and so we land. I didn't know it was a federal holiday in Greenland. So we land, the guy comes out, and it's beautiful. I mean, it is crystal clear above the Arctic Circle. It's like gorgeous. It's freezing cold, but it's beautiful. And this guy comes out, and he's like, so glad they found me. I was like, excuse me? He goes, yeah. He goes, to open up the tower. He goes, today's a federal holiday. The tower's closed. And I'm thinking to myself, buddy, you don't realize I'll be landing on this runway if you said clear to land or not. I said, I was landing today. He started laughing, and he said, there's going to be extra fees because, we had to get, holiday fees and stuff like that. And I'm like, send me the bill. But that was, you always think of problems with fuel associated with bad weather, like you can't land one place, you can't land another, but just be out there, and all I could think of was those big helicopters that are bright red. They always have them when you land in Greenland. You can see the helicopters there for rescue. I kept thinking, I want to meet one of those big red helicopters up in person today, but we made it all the way to the runway and landed, and then the big sign, you're above the Arctic Circle. It's like another DEA adventure, but yeah, it was a DEA's policy is if it's foreign, it's 2 people. The first trips we made back and forth to Afghanistan, it was always 2 senior people. But then toward the end, I've had some junior people fly with me to get the experience of them going back and forth. But when we first started doing it, it was 2 senior people. And then it was 3 people. And we had an issue one day in DEA. We always have adventures. It's one big one after another. Reminds me, we used to have 3 pilots, and we were coming through. When you travel with DEA, we have official passports. We used to have diplomatic passports, but that kind of goes back and forth. Some years we did, some years we didn't. It was a State Department issue. And then it had to do with how many diplomatic passports you could have. They're issued by your diplomatic status is given to you by the country. We just wanted the black passports because they look impressive. So when you go to a country, it just opens doors for you because they know you're important. The official one, they don't quite understand sometimes that you're a U.S. government employee, that you're here for official business. But and the official ones a lot of times require visas, so we always have the blue passports as a backup. One of the other things is when you're traveling in the United States, in these airplanes, you go between, in the city, you've got like your international airport where everybody goes, like you have the commercial airplanes, but then you have a beautiful building usually set aside for the private airplanes. But in foreign countries, they don't have that. So most of the time what happens is you end up being parked like really, really far away, and they send like a shuttle bus out to you, and then they bring you back in to the main terminal to clear customs, like where everybody else is clearing customs, because there's no special area for small airplanes. So we had landed in Egypt, and we were really far away, and we're in the car coming in, and the lady asks for our passports, and we didn't have visas to come through. And most of the time for visas, like if you're a crew member, but the problem is like U.S. government airplane, so it gets all kind of in a gray area. So she asked for our passports, and I hand her my blue passport because I know I don't have any visas, and one of the crew members, the pilot, hands his passport, and it's not the official one, it's the burgundy one. And she's like, you don't have a visa, I need your blue one. And he's like, I don't have my blue one with me. And I was like, you're kidding me. So we ended up actually being kicked. I think we sat in the like holding area in Egypt for, I don't know, 6 or 7 hours. Now it's nighttime. And the reason we were there was because the airplane was broken. And they told us that Beechcraft had a facility there, but Beechcraft's facility had closed like 6 years before that, but it was still listed in their book. But we're like 12 hours difference between Texas, so Texas is giving us information, we're acting on it, but we can't get back to them because they're sleeping. And so now we're in Egypt, there's no Beechcraft facility, the airplane's broken, Egypt won't let us stay, they want to kick us out, and the weather's getting bad, it's nighttime. And finally they said to us, you need to go. I'm like, go where? So finally we ended up going to Jordan, but we left in the middle of the night. And I get the call the next morning from the pilot, the 14, the DEA guy that was in charge of us, the supervisor. He said to me, I don't know why he got so mad at the guy for not having his blue passport, but he was, at that point, just irate. He goes, what do you feel about having just 2 pilots and you finish it with 2? Because I'm going to send him back. I'm like, it's not an issue. it only needs 1 pilot. 3 pilots is, more than we need. But it's nice if someone got sick that you could continue on. He's like, so I'm sending him back commercially. Can you guys finish it on your own? I'm like, sure. So after that, it was always 2 pilots. They always sent just 2 of us and back and forth. That is the best thing about DEA. That is like no other commercial flying organization. The DEA pilots have total control. And it's probably the thing I most appreciate about the flight program is that we pick where we're like, what altitude we're going, how we're going to go, what route we're going to use. It's all picked by, we pick our own routes. In the United States, it's not a big deal. We can take care of everything. We do pay a service because the process is very lengthy, and we pay someone. Like I was talking about Ecuador.
Like a broker?
Yeah, it's called, well, we use Universal Air Service, and you call them up and say, I'm going from Lima to Costa Rica. I need overflight permits for Ecuador and these countries, and then they file the paperwork and get it. Like that's the same thing when we're going back and forth to Afghanistan, which is a paper nightmare. I mean, I couldn't even imagine trying to do that on your own. So we call Universal and we tell them this is who, we have a contract with them. Who I am, where I'm going, and then I tell them my first international stop is here, my second one is going to be Greenland, Iceland, this is the route I want to use, this is the altitude I want to use, and they do all the filing, which makes these trips, or any trip internationally, because they're the ones that have the credibility and get all your permits and do everything. Like one time we're coming from on one of these trips, and the weather was getting bad and the winds were bad. So we could have made it to our next stop, but the issue was we got the next stop and the weather was bad there, which, it was winter time and there was some storms going through. So we ended up I called Universal before I left and said, I think we're going to have to make a halfway stop and I'll let you know. So sure enough, looking at the weather, looking at the fuel, I'm like, you know what, let's just make a stop halfway. So all we do is get on the phone to Universal, say, hey, we're making a stop, and they send their people out the airport. We land, middle of nowhere in a foreign country. They come out with the people, the fuel, everything. Paying for the fuel is really important, so then you have the credibility from the Universal, knowing that their fuel bill will be paid. They come out, fuel your airplane, refile you, and off we went. So. The best organization I've ever been associated with is the Women in Aviation. I'm a charter member. Back in, I think it was, I'm trying to think, must have been 95. I saw this ad in the paper, in a journal, I don't know what it was, talking about that they were having this women's pilots group is going to get together in St. Louis. And I thought, you know what? I said, that, much as I love all this male camaraderie, I said, that might be something I'd be interested in. So I called up DEA, the aviation. I said, hey, there's this group of women that are getting together to discuss, women in aviation. I said, I really would like to go. I said, what do you think? And they're like, great, go. So they paid for me to go. And I went, and I have friends from that day to this day that I still talk to, and it's fun to watch their careers because a lot of them were flight instructors at the time, and now they all work for American and Delta, and they've all gone on to big careers in the commercial world. But that's been, I think there was just a couple hundred of us, and now the organization has thousands and thousands and thousands of women in it.
99s?
No, I never.
Or AOPA?
I belonged to AOPA during my time as a pilot.
Which is Aircraft Owners and Pilots
Right,
Association.
mainly. They're a big support of general aviation, AOPA is, so I paid my dues to support their lobbyists and things that they do to keep general aviation. DEA, as far as being a family and a place to work, I have nothing but it's just been wonderful. It's been just the best career I could ever possibly imagine. I mean, people always say, didn't you want to work for the airline? I never looked back once I started flying with DEA. It didn't even occur to me. It was just the adventure, the adrenaline rush, the places I've been, the things I've seen, oceans I've crossed, the continents I've worked on. I mean, the countries, it's it's hard to imagine ever doing anything different than what I did. It was just the best. It was the best.